Laurtling, Heachta tá fihinómid agat mas mallet.
Thank you very much, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, every day I receive calls or emails from across the country from working people. While their personal circumstances may be very different, there is a single thread running through all of these conversations. Growing numbers of working people in average and above average jobs simply can't afford to rent or buy a home. Now, this is not an accident. It is the direct result of bad Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael housing policy for decades. Recently, I've spoken, for example, to many single people in their 20s, saving every penny they can for a deposit while renting at extortionate rents, and repeatedly being outbid when they put offers by other buyers or, in some cases, by institutional investors. I talk to many couples in their 30s back living at home with their family, putting off having children and again working so hard to save money for a deposit, but unable to secure a big enough loan to buy an affordable home. I recently had a very distressing conversation with a businessman in his 50s, a man of significant means, but following a divorce, he left the family home to his ex-wife. He was paying a portion of the mortgage as well as maintenance, and he simply could not afford to even rent, let alone buy another home. And in fact, that man was sofa surfing at the time in which I spoke to him. I had another very upsetting phone call from a healthcare worker, a woman who has literally put her life at risk during COVID-19 for the good of the community. In her late 40s, unfortunately, through no fault of her own, she lost her first home after the crash. She was in mortgage arrears, distress, and the property was repossessed. But now she would be able to buy again, but because she's treated as a second-time buyer, the 20% deposit requirement and the length of maturity of the mortgage push home ownership beyond reach. Now, Fianna Fáil say they are the party that builds houses. Well, they're not building any houses for the people that I'm talking to. And Darragh O'Brien tells us that he believes in home ownership. Unfortunately, believing is not the same as investing in the homes that these working people rightly deserve. And of course, the cause of our affordable housing crisis is an over-reliance on the private sector. Developer-led planning, developer-led taxation, and developer-led delivery. And there is no doubt that our speculative, developer-led housing system is broken. It cannot and it will not meet the needs of ever-growing sections of our community. And to add insult to injury, government policy has allowed big investors to swallow up increasing volumes of the limited supply of family homes, denying thousands of people from owning their own home and at the same time forcing them to rent at extortionate prices well into the future. So it's very clear, Ceann Comhairle, this has to stop. It is time for government policy to change, and the single most important thing that government could do to make this change is dramatically increase capital investment. The week before Budget 2019, Raise the Roof, the civil society-led campaign led by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, mobilised over 10,000 people outside the Dáil. And inside the Dáil, we unanimously, by a clear majority, should I say, agreed a motion tabled by Raise the Roof TDs to double capital investment in social and affordable homes. Darragh O'Brien and Fianna Fáil supported that. Yet Budget 2019 came and went, no doubling of capital investment. Budget 2020 came and went, and no doubling of capital investment. And in fact, in the general election of 2020, Fianna Fáil promised to deliver 20,000 public homes every year for the lifetime of the government, 10,000 social, 10,000 affordable. And yet when Darragh O'Brien took the floor to introduce his first budget, gone was that election promise. Gone was the commitment to double capital investment in social and affordable homes. Instead, we had derisory increases in social and affordable housing expenditure, showing that Fine Gael was still at the driving wheel. The motion before us is very straightforward. It says to make a serious dent in the affordable housing crisis, we need to spend €2.8 billion annually to build 20,000 social and affordable homes each year for the next 5 years. And if that is done, And if they are delivered at genuinely affordable prices, then we will have a government that's starting to meet the needs of our community. But if you don't do that, this crisis will continue. And on that basis, I commend the motion to the House and urge the government to abandon their failed policies and start to do what everybody knows they must do.
Thank you, Deputy Pearse Doherty.
The provision of affordable housing is a fundamental duty of the state, and I want to commend Ona Bryn for all his work that he has done in putting this front and centre. There's no doubt that this and previous governments have abjectly failed in the duty to provide affordable housing. Housing has become unaffordable, and the majority of workers and families are locked out. Since February 2012, house prices have doubled in Dublin. The same story is told right across the state. Since 2016, house prices have jumped by 30%, while rents have increased by 44%. In my own constituency of Donegal, rents have increased by 7% in the past year alone. And the government has faced with this failure has been desperate to blame everybody but themselves. But it is Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael who have between them held power in the state for the last decade, and your record speaks for itself. In 2016, Fine Gael's Rebuilding Ireland housing plan promised much. It promised to deliver 2,000 affordable rental homes by 2018. The total number delivered to date amounts to 0. In 2018, the previous government under Fine Gael promised to deliver 6,000 affordable purchase homes by 2021. The total number that has been delivered to date is also 0. A failure to deliver. Of course, the housing crisis goes well beyond the issues of affordability, with the legacy of defective housing impacting countless homeowners and renters. In Donegal, thousands of homeowners are affected by mica with their homes seriously damaged. The redress scheme, which requires homeowners to stump up 10% of the cost of remediation, in reality is far more than 10%, in some cases 30 and above. And this has resulted in it being unattainable for so many families, and in short, no use to them whatsoever. As Sinn Féin argued from the beginning, we need a 100% redress scheme, similar to the pirate redemption scheme or remediation scheme that was rolled out in Dublin and North Leinster. As I said last week, many generations now look to the future with their ability to start a family and to secure a home. They look with anxiety and despair. Events over the recent weeks has shown us that the unaffordability and scarcity of housing has been compounded by government's own policy towards investment funds in the housing market. The block purchase of homes by the investment fund and a new development in Maynooth rightly angered the nation. As the public now know, this wasn't an isolated incident, nor was it an accident, but something that has been happening for years as a direct result of government policy. In Dublin alone, 6 out of every 10 new homes were snapped up by these funds in 2019 alone, pushing struggling homeowners out of the market, driving up rents and driving up house prices. And this is by design. In doing so, these funds have been facilitated by government through tax breaks, through advantages, through exemptions that leave these with a huge advantage over struggling home buyers. They also have the advantage that the state actually invests directly into these vulture funds, and also they have the benefit of paying no corporation tax on their rental profits, no capital gain tax, and little by way of stamp duty. Now, Sinn Féin has called for these tax advantages to be brought to an end for years, and now the government has been caught out. They are scrambling to give the appearance of action as the spotlight shines on the crisis of your own making. Now, we will closely scrutinise the proposals that you bring forward. But let me be clear, for the government to in any way exclude apartments from any measures that they're bringing forward is for the government to tell struggling home buyers that an apartment is not a home, and it is. It would also be telling struggling home buyers that they are not welcome in our cities. As I've said, these funds pay no tax on the rental profits and no tax on capital gains. For a stamp duty surcharge, which Sinn Féin has called for and proposed to have any impact, it needs to be applied without exemption at least 17%, but it needs to go beyond that. We need to ensure that their profits are taxed. Anything short of this simply won't cut it. The motion before us is about about making housing affordable again. It calls for doubling direct capital investment in public housing. It calls for annual targets to deliver affordable cost rental and purchase homes, with every local authority in the state to deliver a minimum of 8,000 affordable units each year. Unaffordable and scarce housing is a social crisis. This really, to be dealt with, requires a change of government. But short of that, I ask all deputies to support this motion and start to turn the tide in relation to this crisis. Thank you.
Maurice Quinlivan, please.
Minister, the housing crisis has gotten worse and worse under your government. A generation is being failed as we speak. If you're single and want to buy a home, forget about it. If you're a single parent, purchasing a home seems like a hopeless ambition. Indeed, even those couples with 2 incomes and no dependents struggle to get a foothold on the property ladder. A generation has been squeezed out of property ownership. For many, it's near impossible to get mortgage approval, and if you do get it, it's often for much less than the cost of buying any dwelling. Maybe the house hunter believes that the state can be of assistance, and this is where they're cruelly let down. Maybe they consider social housing to work hard and they earn an average salary or less. They might try and get a council house, HAP or RAS support, but no, the social housing avenue is not an option either, as their income exceeds the income threshold of 31,500 for 2 adults and 1 child in my home county of Limerick. What should they do? Well, it appears that this government expects them to live at home with their parents or to rent. This is a generation that has been bled dry. If they pay rent, they will be paying 44% more than they did in 2016. The average rent in Limerick is $1,293 a month, a 6.3% increase on last year. How are they meant to pay these astronomical rents while saving for the deposit of a house, with house prices having increased by 30% over the same 5-year period? The median property price in Limerick as of March 2021 was €220,000. So we need to get house prices under control. To date, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have failed in this. We need a massive delivery of social and affordable housing. We need to do this. A generation of renters and adult children forced to remain living with their parents cannot afford to wait. We need this government of the day to step up to the mark. We need them to take significant action both on rental prices and on the delivery of affordable and social housing. We need the delivery of at least 8,000 affordable housing each year, and we need the delivery of 4,000 affordable purchases each year. A first step to demonstrate that this is not the case is to stop the selling and gifting of public lands to private developers. Use this land to build public homes, like the type I grew up in myself. I fear, however, that the current minister is not up to the task. The minister has progressed his failed housing policy on the main title under his remit. He has failed and failed consistently. I will conclude my comments by urging those who want to see an end to the housing crisis to support this motion and ensure that the generation is failed no longer.
Deputy Tully.
Minister, countless people have contacted my office in relation to the lack of affordable housing in counties Cavan and Monaghan. Constituents contact me wondering what they should do, and perhaps you as Minister will advise. The local authority informs them that they are over the threshold for social housing. Perhaps they've got a few extra shifts at work or have had their hours increased, and suddenly they no longer qualify for social housing. However, that means they no longer qualify for any sort of housing support payment, but they can't afford to rent a property at the current market values. So they have a decision to make, and that decision frequently results in them turning down work, turning down the extra shifts, or refusing to claim a social welfare payment they are entitled to because they must restrict their income in order to qualify for social housing, or to be more exact, qualify for social housing supports. And these are individuals or couples who are quite happy to work, to increase their hours and support themselves and their families, and would quite happily rent privately, but they cannot afford to. The alternative is to try and squash in with parents, which is not always an option, or become homeless. Even properties of a very low standard, properties which are dark and damp and mouldy and don't have sufficient space, are being rented out to families and individuals for exorbitant rents. And these are places that no one would rent if they had any sort of choice. They are houses that are in bad condition, and they're bad for people's health and for their physical and mental well-being, but they've no choice. To rent a 3-bedroom property in Cavan, it costs approximately €900 per month. In fact, according to the RTB, average rents in Cavan have risen by 27% in 4 years, and in Monaghan by 17%. We've couples whose relationship has ended, being forced to continue living together, as again they can't afford to live in separate dwellings due to lack of availability and affordability. And there's just no properties available at any cost or any description or of any sort in my constituency. I think last week a constituent told me there were 6 properties available for rent, and none of them that she could afford. Minister, action has to be taken to deal with this problem because it's just getting worse and worse, and people are worried and stressed out about how to afford the rent. They're being forced into property. You must begin a programme of building affordable houses for rent and for purchase. Housing need throughout this country is at a crisis point, and action needs to be taken. I'm listening to young people who are telling me that they are going to emigrate because they cannot afford any sort of reasonable standard of living in this country.
Deputy Chris Andrews.
Thanks, Ceann Corla. I'd like to commend my colleague Eoin Ó Broin for this motion on housing and all the work he has done around this particular issue. The inability to purchase new homes because they are unaffordable is nothing new to people and residents living in Dublin Bay South. Young working families haven't been able to purchase affordable homes for a long, long time. Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Amazon and now TikTok have all moved into Ringsend and Pearse Street area and right across South Dublin. As they've moved in, the prices of buying and renting even modest homes has gone through the roof. Earlier this year, my colleague, again, Eoin Ó Broin, got information under the FOI, which showed that the Department of Housing was told that Dublin City Council was under pressure to secure the funds to purchase the 2 sites where the affordable and public housing will be situated on the Glassbottle site. It is reported that many in Dublin City Council, working in Dublin City Council housing section, seem to doubt whether affordable homes can be delivered on the Glassbottle site. Even if they are delivered, it seems they won't actually be affordable to ordinary working families. They may be affordable to the high-paid executives working in the tech companies, but not to young working families. They have to continue to live with their parents or pay huge rents that prevents them from saving for a home. In June of last year on News Talk, the Minister said that he would be looking at house prices in the region of 160,000 to 180,000 from 230 to 250 on a shared equity basis. Now it seems the affordable homes, if delivered in Ringsend or Harold's Cross or right across South Dublin and Dublin City, will be in the region of 450,000. 450,000 cannot possibly be classed as affordable. How can ordinary working families ever hope to buy a house in the community they went to school in? The Irish Glassbottle Housing Action Group, who have campaigned tirelessly for affordable homes on the Glassbottle site, are extremely concerned that people will not be able to afford affordable housing on the Glassbottle site. And if there is any affordable housing, because the 450,000 clearly can't be reached by many people, nearly all people that have grown up and lived in the community. The Minister needs to state clearly that there will be affordable homes on the Glassbottle site and they will not cost 450,000. We need to make homes affordable again.
Patricia Ryan.
I also commend Deputy Ó Broin on this. Urgent action is needed if this government is not to condemn yet another generation to yet more precarious rental situations. It goes beyond indifference to describe successive Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments' attitude to housing, and don't get me started on Labour and the Greens. They acted as a mudguard when policies were introduced that stopped the building of public houses on public land, and I'd have you believe they did nothing. Last year we had an election at which housing was one of the main issues raised on the doors, and the people who voted in that election wanted action, and what they got was indifference and inaction. We have a revelation after revelation that shows that this government is working against the people. On one hand, they pretend to do something about it, and on the other hand, they're investing in the very cuckoo funds that have moved into the nest of the first-time buyers, and have the very vulture funds that are picking up at the carcass of any hopes of the ordinary worker having renting or owning their own home. It is becoming increasingly difficult to buy a home at the cost of housing, and it has increased by 30% since 2016, while the cost of renting has increased by 44% in the same period. This government announces plans to great fanfare but has not delivered. In 2016, Rebuilding Ireland promised to deliver 2,000 affordable rental homes by 2018. To date, not a single affordable rental home has been delivered. It does not have to be this way. Sinn Féin in government will turn housing policy away from benefiting vulture funds and other institutional investors, away from benefiting developers, and will turn the tide back in favour of ordinary workers and ordinary families. This government does not want to solve the housing crisis. It would not suit the cosy cartel of government TDs and their investment or actual involvement in these vultures. I am inundated with emails from people who are bidding their time against the next election. The dogs on the street know that this government cannot solve this crisis, and it should stand aside and let somebody who can do it. Thank you.
Deputy Desi Ellis is our first contributor.
Minister, increasing house prices along with high rents are proven to be a major roadblock for families, workers and those wanting to get on the property ladder. We are in a housing emergency, and this cannot be stated often enough. It is a man-made crisis perpetuated by successive governments and their failed policies and ideologies, and this present government is no exception and is continuing to put forward failed policies and strategies. The Minister has put forward housing proposals which will not deliver social and affordable housing on the necessary scale required, or even houses that are affordable. The government's view of what is affordable goes beyond what most couples on good incomes can actually afford to buy. The Minister's housing plans, which include schemes such as the shared equity scheme, lack ambition, will inflate house prices, will increase personal debt and go against expert opinion. His proposals were highly condemned as ill-conceived by housing associations, housing experts and economic organisations. Yet they were robustly defended by local Fianna Fáil TDs, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Now, with a public backlash, these very same Fianna Fáil TDs are imploring the Minister to revise his proposals. We need to be getting away from the reliance on private developers building social and affordable housing. The Minister's policies pander to the private sector and to the very vulture funds and similar who can avail of significant grants and tax exemptions, allowing them to buy up whole housing estates. In my constituency of Dublin North West, for example, we have a company that bought a whole housing estate in Kildare and is now buying up whole apartment blocks in Santry just to rent them out. This is happening in other areas of my constituency, and I am hearing every day from my constituents of their frustrations as they try to get on the property ladder. Investment funds are driving up property prices and driving up rents. Local authorities should be the drivers behind the building of social and affordable housing, not private developers. In my constituency, lands belonging to local authorities have been identified around Finglas, Ballymun, Whitehall and Santry, where housing can be built at an affordable rate. The only winners from the Minister's proposals will be the investment funds and private developers, and the losers will be the families and young couples looking for affordable housing.
Now, Deputy Darren O'Rourke.
The housing crisis has hit workers and families in my own county of Meath extremely hard. According to the latest Daft.ie rental report, the average rent in Meath is now €1,415, up 4.9% on this time last year. Rents are 118% higher than their lowest point a few years ago, and the monthly rent people are paying is double what a mortgage repayment would be. I'm a renter myself. Many younger people are still living with their parents or sharing a house with others to try and keep rent affordable. Families can't settle in one area as leases expire and they have to move on. People have no security of tenure. We've thousands of people on the housing list in Meath, and 157 people in our county remain homeless according to the latest figures. And this didn't happen by chance. This housing crisis is a direct result of the terrible housing policies pursued by Fine Gael over the last decade and voted through by Fianna Fáil over years of their disastrous confidence and supply agreement. People are totally locked out of the housing market and have zero confidence in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to fix it because they know your policies actually caused it. In my own county of Meath, the proposals are at the minute to de-zone hundreds of acres of land. A county that has delivered housing. It certainly hasn't delivered affordable housing, but has delivered housing in recent years. And there are proposals there to de-zone hundreds of acres of land. I have a perfect example. Deputy Burke mentioned that it takes 3 years to deliver houses from start to finish. The Rebuilding Ireland programme on the 1st of July 2016 proposed a council housing development, public housing development on the Coláiste de Lacy site in Ashbourne. Those houses will be delivered at this stage in Q1 2023, 7 years later. That's private, publicly owned land. The Department of Education working with the local authority, and that's how long it takes this government to deliver on housing. To me, that says everything you need to know about this government's commitment to delivering public housing on public land. They're not serious about it, and they will never do it.
Now, Deputy Ward and then Deputy O'Leary.
Well, I'm all good, Count Corder. I just want to thank my constituency colleague Owen O'Brien for not only putting down this motion, but in also writing a blueprint on how to fix the housing crisis caused by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Owen has put forward solutions that will allow workers and families to get a secure roof over their heads. Only last week, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael voted against giving renters a break, and to compound this, they also voted to allow vultures to continue to pick at the flesh of ordinary workers and families who are desperate for a home. We need to get housing prices under control after years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael failures, and give first-time buyers a chance. €400,000 is not affordable in anybody's language. We also need to make sure that families whose housing needs have changed are not left languishing in overcrowded homes. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil housing policies have created a perfect storm that has denied workers and families a secure home. The cost of housing has increased by 30% since 2016, while the cost of renting has increased by 44% in the same period. In fact, I first became a public representative in 2016, and I don't need a calculator to work out how many affordable housing was built in my area in Dublin Midwest since then. It's a big, fat zero. The government have broken its social contract with its citizens. Because of systemic failures by successive governments, we do not meet the housing needs that our citizens have. Young people are particularly affected by the government's failures. An ESRI report found that young people are experiencing wage stagnation and warned that the housing crisis was exacerbating their situation. It's predicted that this will be the first generation that will never be able to own their own home unless changes in housing policies occur. Changes that put people before vultures. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael created the housing crisis and are not equipped to fix it. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and looking for different results. It's time for change, and Sinn Féin will deliver this change. We will deliver housing that everyone can access.
Thank you, Deputy O'Leary.
I hear deputies from the other side of the House talk about opposition for opposition's sake, and it's just such nonsense, to be honest with you. I don't think there's very few opposition spokespersons who've produced the quality and detail of constructive, realistic, costed alternatives as Deputy O'Brien, and including in this motion and many other policy documents and bills and legislation. And the fact is, many pieces of legislation that the government have brought forward, where there are good sections, where there are good proposals, they'll be backed, and they have been backed. And the record of the Dáil will reflect that. And where they're not, and there's been many disastrous proposals, they will be voted against. And that is our job, to make sure that the government isn't continuing in the footsteps of well over 10 years, probably 20 years, of failed housing policy that has brought us to this situation. And to be honest, the people who are talking about opposition for opposition's sake, people who are making these criticisms, don't believe it themselves. They don't believe a word of it, because they know what Sinn Féin wants. They know what the people want, and that's affordable housing. But it's part of a strategy, and it's part of a strategy that I believe is misconceived and I believe isn't going to work. You have by-election candidates talking about trying to be a voice for people who can't afford a house. Fine Gael have been in government since 2011. There's a new series of reeling the years. You have to go back to the start of it before Fine Gael weren't in government. You've had years to solve this, And you have representatives standing up, railing against this somehow, saying that they'll be the voice for people who can't afford their own homes. People go out. People don't want much sometimes when you look at it. Like what they want from government is the ability to live a quality life. And at the heart of that is that you have the opportunity to go out there, you go out and work, you get qualifications, you serve your time, you go to college, whatever. And it's all with the aspiration of being able to build a life for yourself or for your family or for whatever. But people are going out to work today and they cannot see how they're ever going to reach that. Social housing they may not qualify for, and the eligibility for that is getting tighter all the time. And the ability to afford your own home is becoming more and more out of reach, no matter how hard people work. The reality is the solution here is about public homes on public land, and no end of tax breaks for vultures or cuckoos or anything like that is going to crack this. So until you bring forward proposals that are going to work, we're not going to back them.
Thank you,
we're going to back the proposals that do work.
Agus an talk Matt Cartier Dewsborough.
It's bad enough that the government appear blind to the solutions, but in fact we now know that government is an active contributor to the dysfunction in our housing system. Since 2016, Cathaoirleach house prices have risen by 30%. Rents increased by 44%. The cost of a home in the first quarter of this year was 7.6% higher than the same period last year. And behind every one of these increases in rent or house prices are ordinary families and workers struggling to get themselves into a home or to retain their homes. And repeatedly, government solutions are more of the same. It's handouts, it's freebies, and it's tax breaks. But for the corporate landlords, for the speculators, for the vultures. We heard in here only last week, speaker after speaker from the government side, feigning anguish and crying crocodile tears at the very thought that investment funds could be purchasing up large swathes of family homes. Then it turns out that the government, the same parties, were actually investing in those same investment funds. So we need an increase in the delivery of social and affordable housing to deliver homes for those who need them and to reduce the pressure that's putting up rents and house prices. Every single week, Eoin Ó Broin and Sinn Féin bring forward those proposals that will do exactly that. And every single week, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Green Party TDs vote it down in the hope, in the absolute blind aspiration that Dara O'Brien's policies, which are a repeat of the Fine Gael policies before and will somehow deliver different results. What we're calling for is to double the direct investment in public housing to the very least of €2.8 billion per year, because that's what's needed. That's what Sinn Féin's proposals bring. So there's another opportunity this week to government deputies. Do they actually stand for change, stand for delivering houses for those young people who they speak so eloquently about, or do they continue with the repeatedly failed policies that have not secured the homes that our young people deserve?
Louise O'Reilly.
I want to commend Dr. Eoin Ó Broin not alone for this motion here this evening, but for all of the work that he has done and continues to do to fix the mess that successive governments have created in terms of our housing market. That government policy has failed is not in question any longer. For decades now, the policies of successive governments have failed. They've failed young people, they've failed renters, they've failed first-time buyers, they have failed every person who wants security in their home. And the evidence of this is all around us. And Minister, I'll tell you, the evidence is in my family. It might not be in yours, but it is definitely in mine. And it's not that long since you and the Green Party and Fianna Fáil crashed our economy off a cliff. The solution put forward by Fine Gael and the Labour Party was to invite the vulture funds in, roll out the red carpet for them. And I see the impact of those decisions every single day day of the week in my constituency offices in Swords and Balbriggan and right across Fingal, and where I am proud to represent people who are at the business end of your policies, because your policies have failed them. And the human impact of this crisis is all around you, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. Open your eyes. Don't reach blindly for the silly rhetoric that comes out of Fianna Fáil and come in here and repeat it. Junior Minister Noonan, please have a bit of respect for the people who are listening to this debate here this evening. All I can say is this. We have been constructive. We have put forward solutions. We have used our own experience. Minister, more than 20 years ago, I was able to buy a house. I bought a house because by the time she was 5, my daughter had had 6 separate addresses, because that's what it was like, and it's worse now, renting in Dublin. I was able to buy a house on an ordinary income. That's gone from people now. People can't aspire to owning their own home and having security. In 1969, my father, mother, people like Bernard and Betty Brown, they were part of the Dublin Housing Action Committee, and Minister, they demanded adequate housing, fair rents for proper homes, protection from eviction, and an end to the scandal of empty homes. More than 50 years on, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren are fighting for the same, and this time they are fighting the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Green Party government, and fight we will and win we will.
Thank you, Chair. In the last half an hour, the Cabinet has concluded its deliberations and they've announced their plan to address the issue of investment funds bulk buying family homes. And I have to say, I've just read the press release and it is an absolute cop-out. The government plan will do nothing to stop investment funds from bulk buying family homes. The proposed planning changes won't apply to existing planning permissions, and they won't apply to future apartment developments. The tax changes are absolutely minimal, and they also won't apply to apartments. So here's what's going to happen. Bulk buying of houses, duplexes and apartments that were intended for owner-occupiers, whether first-time buyers or others, will continue to be snapped up by international investment funds. And then the people who aren't able to buy those homes will then be forced to continue to rent houses, duplexes and apartments at exorbitant rates. How anybody thinks that is an adequate response to the very legitimate outpouring of anger by people enraged by the failure of successive government housing policies is really beyond me. And I think very quickly people are going to see tonight's announcement for the cop-out that it is. Let me reply to some of the government's responses to our private members' motion. You see, at the centre of this is a very simple proposition. If people want large volumes of affordable homes to rent and to buy, if the Green Party genuinely want to see the policy that they campaigned for in their election manifesto, large volumes of good quality, energy efficient apartments in our city centre being delivered for prices that people can afford to rent or buy, then there's only one way of doing it. And that is very significant increases in direct capital investment by government to ensure local authorities, approved housing bodies and community housing trusts can deliver those homes. And you see, the government ministers can come in here and say as many times as they want, they believe in home ownership, they believe in affordability, they believe in fair rents. But the figures tell a very different story. So not a single affordable home to rent or buy has been delivered by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in the last 5 years. This year, we are only going to see 530 affordable homes, 90 of them to buy and the remainder to rent, although I have to say some of the prices are way beyond the reach of ordinary working people. And then according to the officials from the Department of Housing to the Oireachtas Housing Committee only a matter of weeks ago, next year we're only going to see 700 new homes through the Service Sites Fund and possibly breach 1,000 in 2023. That's not an affordable housing programme. that's an insult to the working people who desperately need affordable housing. Likewise, with the Land Development Agency, it was to be the great white hope of increasing housing supply. None of their units will be ready until 2023, they told the Oireachtas Housing Committee recently, and even then it will only be a few hundred. It'll be 2025, Minister, before the LDA will breach 1,000 homes. And by that stage, the affordable housing crisis will be even worse. So what do we need to do? We need to listen to the Economic and Social Research Institute. Only 2 weeks ago, they said double direct capital investment in delivery of social and affordable homes. That would mean spending this year and next year $2.8 billion instead of the $1.4 billion. Even the IMF has said it is possible and necessary for government to commit that kind of capital investment. And if you don't do that, if you continue to throw tiny sums of money, 35 million this year for cost rental and just 50 million for affordable purchase, then the gap between the government's rhetoric and the reality of people's housing need on the ground will grow ever wider. Anger will increase, and once COVID is over, folks, let's be very, very clear, we will see mobilisations on the street like we have not seen for decades, because people will be demanding a very simple thing: for the political parties in government to honour the commitments they have made for years and yet failed to meet for years. So I make no apology for proposing this alternative housing proposition tonight. Double capital investment in public housing, deliver 20,000 social and affordable homes a year for the next 5 years. Make sure those homes are genuinely affordable, rents below 900, house prices below 230,000, and stop gifting and selling public land to private developers to build and sell unaffordable houses. Chair, I fully commend this motion to the House.